It's the 24th September of 1997. Ultima Online was released. I was 2 years old back then, and PCs looked something like this. 19th March and 2nd November of 1999, EverQuest and Asheron's Call, respectively, were released to the world as well. These three titles are often regarded as the founding fathers of MMORPGs, although there were a couple more, and are still played to this day. Yet the real explosion of the genre happened around 5 years later, hailing from none other than the formerly known Silicon and Synapse, or Chaos Studio, which eventually became Blizzard Entertainment. A studio well known for their already established titles such as StarCraft, Diablo, and of course Warcraft, Orcs and Humans.
Prince Arthas, Lord Uther needs you at the Orc encampment immediately.
Pioneering not only more well-polished and complex games for their time, but also pushing the boundaries of multiplayer in a world where video games were still a long way off of being a mainstream hobby. In late 2004 for the US and the early 2005 for EU, World of Warcraft was released. A game so entangling that gaming as a whole was pushed further into the mainstream media.
Alright, major stone shield potions should be... Oh god, I'm gonna have diarrhea again. You can't go to the bathroom, you're stacking Sunder armor.
By 2008, the second expansion, Wrath of the Lich King, became the fastest selling PC game of all time, with 2.8 million copies sold in 24 hours.
Into forgotten lands. You will see wonders beyond imagining.
By 2013, World of Warcraft still encompassed 36% of the entire MMORPG market, and received a Guinness World Record for being the most popular MMO, as well as later on, the most successful computer game. And with that massive success, a slew of aspiring MMORPGs and copycats was released to the world. World of Warcraft was the flame that ignited a gigantic wave of MMORPGs. Age of Conan, Ion, All Odds Online, Arcade, Runes of Magic, Dragon Nest, Perfect World, Guild Wars, just to name a few. So what the f happened? In 2017, 39.5% of the massive multiplayer online market was taken up by MMORPGs. 2022, those numbers are projected to hit a record low of 9.9%. Now, obviously those numbers are estimations, but just to understand this decline better, let's take a look at the recent years. The biggest MMORPG release in 2019 was a re-released World of Warcraft classic. A vast majority of people thought the title would fail, including Blizzard.
Have you ever thought about adding servers for previous expansions as they were then?
No. And by the way, you don't want to do that either. You think you do, but you don't. Remember when you had to like spam cities and say, need a tank, need a tank, need a tank during the Burning Crusade days? You don't remember that because now you just push a button that says go to the dungeon. You don't want to do that.
But the numbers said otherwise. Now all of a sudden Blizzard realized that they can make money off of recycling old games without putting a lot of effort into it.
And sure, we all call the game WoW, but really, wow. I could not believe I got bit by the MMO bug again. I was so excited to be able to make a Night Elf Hunter and be like that famous Dark Elf Ranger from the books that I loved.
How do you do, fellow kids?
2020, not a single noteworthy MMORPG was published in the Western world. And to make things worse, I want to show you an article of PC Gamer, showcasing the most anticipated MMORPGs of 2021. And what a surprise, nothing new. Although, if you do your research, there are a couple of potentially interesting, but not by any means groundbreaking titles in the making. Spoiler alert, a re-released WoW TBC will be the most impactful MMORPG release of this year. And even today, in a timeline of next to no new MMORPG releases, MMORPG media and fantasy is as popular as ever. I would even go as far as saying that the genre is being romanticized by movies and anime such as Ready Player One, Sword Art Online, and plenty of other isekai anime. The demand for a groundbreaking MMORPG is high, yet no one wants to put in the work to create something great. Well, before we zip into the future, let's take a look at what happened between 2005 and 2021 to create the present dark ages of MMORPGs.
Ah, don't grieve. You'll soon join your loved ones.
I grieve for you. You've made life your enemy. And that is a war you'll never win. You can kill us, but you cannot kill hope.
Can't I?
What happened to the wonders of MMORPGs to make them so mundane and boring? Streamlining content, decreasing the size and relevance of the world just to funnel people into irrelevant instances. I'm calling these the 4 pillars of ruin. It all intertwine with each other to make MMORPGs as bad as they are. World of Warcraft Vanilla felt a lot more immersive than Shadowlands ever could, even when replaying it in the modern era with Classic. Modern BDO is also a lot less of an authentic world than vanilla BDO was. It's a common theme to dumb down the game's overarching world systems to be replaced by dull instances, sharding, weird events that undermine previous player progression, just to artificially tap into the human psyche with systems like attendance rewards and time gating to keep the players coming back, although there's zero new content and of course catch-up system that make doing half the content in the game irrelevant. The list goes on. There's one important design philosophy that makes a whole world of a difference. The moment a company designs a game to be a product, to manipulate the player into spending money, or to artificially prolong playtime. Designing systems intentionally lackluster so the player feels either entitled to spend money to fix said system, or to create psychological gameplay loops like time gating, dailies, weeklies, which are neither fun nor engaging. Back in the day, games often started as passion projects, focusing on player expression and freedom of choice. You weren't some godlike champion of Azeroth or some hero of the people. You were an adventurer, an explorer who the world was not revolving around. This is crucial from a game design perspective. Player A, who's not being forced to do anything in the world, not forced to progress some artificial storyline, can follow whatever storyline he wants. Maybe he will decide to not follow any storyline at all and focus on crafting and farming monsters, exploring dungeons, essentially creating his own story. Player B is currently in a queue for a dungeon. He doesn't know the entrance, let alone what region it is in, let alone what the boss mechanics are. He doesn't need to know, because the danger of said dungeon is designed to be next to zero. Until you get to a dungeon, you then have to squeeze the difficulty out of by speedrunning it and facing completely disconnected affixes that change every week for no apparent reason. You know what I'm talking about. Player A, while exploring said dungeon, is forced to learn about the little secrets and pathways that exist inside, looking around for rare materials or hidden quests. Player B, meanwhile, is miserable in an endless gameplay loop that doesn't allow for professions or hidden quests to exist in the first place. Let's look at this from another angle. There's an in-game event which rewards you an RNG loot box. It could give you anything from a rotten fish to some endgame item that you would normally have to farm out in the world. Not only does this undermine the world's resources, but it also inflates the market with such rewards. I have a great example for this as well. All the way back at Black Desert Online's release, the best in slot necklace in the game was only found by a single mob in the entire world. That mob is, of course, an ogre. That ogre wasn't only pretty tough to beat, There were also around 10 ogres in the entire world. Said ogre would drop an item called Ogre Ring with a very low chance, which was actually used by the players as a necklace. Makes sense, right? Now that Ogre Ring was a strong endgame item, which obviously would then breed open world PvP, because there was only a limited amount of ogres on each server. Now, obtaining an Ogre Ring was an achievement in and of itself. A couple of years later, 99% of Ogre Rings on the marketplace are obtained through RNG event boxes. No one is killing ogres to actually get an Ogre Ring anymore. Speaking of ogres, let's talk about Danger. In a vast fantasy world with dragons, orcs, weird dwarf furries, and other scary stuff, Danger is an imperative to create an authentic world. Isn't the challenge, especially in the open world, exactly what makes you invested in the first place? Overcoming a trial of danger. For any of you who played Classic WoW, this becomes very apparent. Nowadays, people are much better at video games, as a whole. But regardless of the game being completely figured out, the leveling experience was around 100 times better than that of the modern version. Every little upgrade helps you survive a little better in the harsh environment of the world, making upgrades while leveling a lot more worthwhile and exciting.
Oh dude, 4 strength, 4 stam, leather belt. Ah!
Now this obviously also goes hand in hand with the amount of time spent leveling. If there's no reason to get better at the game and to get better gear, to maybe progress a little bit faster or to kill those nasty goblins easier, then why do it in the first place? And obviously, Danger also breeds community, but you've heard that argument around 100 times already, so I'll keep it at that.
Biggest roamer.
Ever thought back to the days where you looked like a flea market running around? How great it felt to get that new item piece, not only for the stats, but also for the looks. Visual progression through gear and abilities is also something the modern market underestimates. There's so much potential just in that department. Nobody really gives a shit about transmogre costumes, since if anyone can get almost everything, half the feeling of success is gone. To feel like a winner, there also has to be a loser. Well, unless you somehow ended up in the highest echelons of transmog competitions, of course.
This guy somehow makes it in every single time. I'm gonna test my drill on this midget. What the fuck?
You understand what I'm getting at. A casual player doesn't want to do daily quests either, although those are literally implemented for casual players. When I was 12 years old, playing 6 hours a month of WoW, because I could only play at my dad's place, I didn't have any less fun. Although everyone else was way ahead of me. Just the world itself was challenging, and getting to level 30 felt like an achievement. You know, there's one more big reason why games feel so much less like worlds to explore anymore.
Early access.
Buy this pre-order package to
play
play the game's
public alpha test.
closed beta test with
This
no
will
idea
have
to beat that box. Did you not download Deadly Cuck mods? Oh yes, you can download an add-on that literally tells you what. Now all of the things above contribute to a much bigger issue. There's next to no mystery or trial and error period anymore. Most games have multiple open beta and alpha tests before the game releases, essentially making exploring close to useless, which removes a big part of the MMORPG appeal. If everything is already min-maxed and fought through before the majority of the player base even touched the game, then that just breeds these kind of shortcuts. With the internet evolving to what it is today, there's next to no exploration or mystery in modern MMORPGs. And I don't only mean exploring the world for secret treasures and hidden questlines. You remember when you tried to find the entrance of the Wailing Caverns for the first time? That was an adventure just to get to the dungeon. Or how half the newly released MMORPGs in the West come out around 2 years earlier in Asia, making the game entirely figured out before we can even get our hands on it. Depressing, honestly. For me, a big part of MMORPG excitement is being a pioneer. Traversing lands that no one knows anything about yet, finding materials of which no one knows their function yet, finding recipes that no one has crafted yet. Mystery and exploration are imperative to a successful and enjoyable MMORPG experience. The amount of information that is so easily accessible ruins the part of the game entirely. Now, a lot of people have one specific argument against what I just said. Now, you could just not look into anything, just don't download the add-ons, just stop watching streamers and YouTube videos, and just isolate yourself in an online game to feel something again.
And these comments do not matter. Everything is temporary. Everything will eventually rot away, as long as the factor of time continues to be the apex predator of the universe. The inevitable decay of all pain and memory is unstoppable.
Gimping yourself to re-experience some of the mystery and exploration doesn't make a lot of sense for anyone even slightly competitive. But there's actually a couple of games that are still incredibly complex and hard to understand, despite the overwhelming amount of information present. I want to give you 3 very different examples. Number 1. Resembles the mechanical complexity that can only be learned by continuous and long-term practice. No amount of information will allow you to use most of the advanced mechanics and techniques without actual muscle memory practice. Most people will be very surprised by this pick. I myself wasn't aware of how complex this game is for a long time. The amount of mechanical prowess and frame-perfect inputs required make this game one of the most intricate games you could ever play competitively. So no matter how many guides you read and how much help you get, at the end of the day you have to put in the hours to create muscle memory and even pull off some of these frame-perfect executions. For number 2, I picked chess. I think this one is completely self-explanatory. Chess has been played for well over 1,000 years and there's still new strategies surfacing. Just after the second move, there are over, I think, 190,000 different possible board combinations. Again, with this degree of complexity and scale, no guide in the world will make the game too simple. And for number 3, obviously I had to pick Path of Exile. And this is also a no-brainer. How many people look at the skill tree and say, holy shit, that's insane. Funnily enough, the skill tree is only the tip of the iceberg. Ascendancy classes, hundreds of build-altering uniques, cluster jewels, a billion different stats and buffs that all compound with each other. Catalysts, anoints, auras that actually are curses but are now auras, exposure, dodge, evade, block, life, energy shield, leech, more damage, increased damage, shock, freeze, burn, ignite, scorch, brittle. Path of Exile is what many believe to be the spiritual successor to Diablo 2. Because Blizzard doesn't know what they're doing anymore. Just understanding PoE stats and options will already take a long time, but combining those options and making your own builds that aren't complete dogshit is actually really challenging. There are people that play the game for thousands of hours without ever beating the last boss.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
So in summary, if we want to retain the mystery and exploration of video games or MMORPGs, the games themselves have to be ridiculously complex. And I think scale is very important as well. The scale of WoW Vanilla's relevant zones and the scale of Shadowlands' relevant zones isn't even in the same universe. Somehow MMORPG developers are putting less effort and less content in the modern versions of their games, despite making absolutely ridiculous amounts of money. We need a game the size of multiple WoW Vanillas to achieve the same degree of mystery in a modern MMO environment. But that means corporate clowns have to spend money, and that won't happen. Now again, here we could give like a couple hundred examples of different games that fall into this category, but I will obviously take examples again that I'm most familiar with. Firstly, we'll start with WoW. So not only is it sub-based, but also has a box price for not only the base, but also each additional expansion you want to play afterwards. But nowadays, WoW also has a WoW token, which allows you to either pay your WoW sub with in-game currency, or buy in-game currency with the price of the sub fee. essentially making buying and equipped gear pay to win. On top of that, they have an entire MTX cash shop, which you would think is only found in free-to-play games. Well, not anymore. Mounts, pets, transmog items. All things that used to be exclusive to in-game rewards now aren't so exclusive anymore. We could also mention the amount of thought and work that is being put into the modern game in comparison to the old days, but that's a whole nother discussion. Shadowlands is time gating the player wherever they can, so that limited, lazy, and uncreative content doesn't go to waste as quickly. Torghast. If you want to see an entire video where I just dismantle Blizzard for 30 minutes, let me know. Now, let's take a look at a different game with a different issue. Black Desert Online. Infamous nowadays for its pay to win, but that wasn't always the case. In fact, the game released with extremely limited pay to win. The Western release version of BDO didn't even have a handful of impactful pay to win items, and to make things worse, was publicly announced by its publishers to never include such items.
We believe that Black Desert Online as a game has a good enough quality that we can actually ask for money up front, and it will also help to balance the game because we don't have to use free-to-play, pay-to-win antics to earn money.
And to make things worse for the MMORPG community, they formally announced Crimson Desert, which was initially announced to be a story prequel MMORPG to BDO, was recently changed to not only not be a part of the Black Desert universe anymore, but also not even an MMORPG. So all the money people spend on BDO isn't even flowing back into a new title of the series. The players optimize the fun out of everything. While it's obviously true that the players try their best to play as time efficiently as possible, especially when we're talking about getting a competitive advantage over someone else, the issue just comes with the territory. We talked about information pollution before, and I believe that is one of the biggest factors why this is happening in the first place. There's no reason to explore, no reason to figure things out, because an add-on tells you what to do. Why wouldn't you aim for the only thing that still resembles a challenge? Competition. Effort versus efficiency is also what companies think about all the time. While the players try to min-max the progression and characters, the company behind it tries to min-max the amount of people they have to pay and the amount of money they receive. The less people working on the game, the less money they have to spend. I think we can all agree that BFA was at least the second worst expansion ever made. After the absolute disaster that was BFA, WoW Shadowlands broke the record of the most copies sold on release day for any PC game ever, at 3.7 million copies sold. And you know what the most anticipated feature of the new expansion was? Removing a system they implemented a patch before. Eruptions. Why would Blizzard actually put effort into the game if they can keep getting away with their dogshit ass releases? I'm guilty here as well. I also deluded myself into thinking Shadowlands will be good and purchased the game just like everyone else. Comparatively, Shadowlands is a lot better than BFA, but does that make it a good game? Absolutely not. So there's really only one way to break the cycle of dogshit MMO releases, and that is real competition. Someone somewhere has to step up and make an MMO so fucking good that even the I play WoW and nothing else people finally let go.
Now, cast him into the maw. Return him to the darkness he served. His eternal suffering awaits.
He was my student.
Remember what he did, and take your vengeance.
Not vengeance. Justice.
But there's one more thing that's not so much responsible for ruining the genre, but more so hindering it from resurfacing. And that's technical and human limitations. Creating a modern MMO that would comparatively impact the world the same way WoW did in 2005 is almost impossible, at least for newer companies. The game would have to have such an immense amount of complexity and scale that we all would want to spend 16 hours a day playing MMOs again. Is such a task possible without insane amounts of funding, making a game feel more like an entire separate world, just like the old school MMOs used to? You know, maybe I'm just getting old, and I'm falling out of love with video games in general. But after looking into this so much, and playing MMORPGs for 14 years, I just feel like someone I used to hang out with all the time is just not showing up anymore. Whew, now that we got the depressing part out of the way, how would we look into what's happening to the genre in the future? Sorry to say, but the future isn't looking much brighter. Outside of TBC, we have Elion, Lost Ark, and New World releasing in the West this year. Well, probably. I played both Lost Ark and New World extensively already. Lost Ark has great potential to become a really fun experience for a while. Great attention to detail, fighting game-esque combat system, and overall a very polished game. But it had a lot of problems when I last played it on the Russian realms a year or so back. The developers seem to not at all understand what MMORPG endgames should play like having insane time gating and daily and weekly quests, and still no ranked 1v1 PvP system, which is in all honesty the game's strongest point. New World is honestly looking to be a fun sidekick for about a week. The studio behind has absolutely no idea how to make an MMORPG, complete lack of vision and creativity. I'll be genuinely surprised if the full release of the game warrants more than a 3 out of 10 in a full review. I've made a really big feedback post after the preview event of last year. If you want to read through it, I will have a link to the Reddit post down below. Elion is another Korean pay-to-win title published by none other than pay-to-win publisher themselves, Kakao Games. Again, I think the game has enough going for it that it will be fun for a couple of weeks, but also nothing outstanding and long-term. Outside of that, there's a couple of interesting games in development, such as Project BBQ from the Dungeon Fighter Online creators, which has by far the most promising combat system of any upcoming MMORPG release. Then we have Arc H2 also being made, we don't know anything about that. Riot is currently getting into making an MMORPG as well, but also here we have zero info on what's actually happening. So don't expect the game anytime soon. And lastly, Ashes of Creation. This game has been hyped up for a while now, and I've been following it personally since its Kickstarter campaign in 2017. I even played their test battle royale Apocalypse. And while the game is currently undergoing a combat revamp, the BR game I played 2.5 years ago had a much more fluid combat system. Even if you're super excited about Ashes, I encourage you to be cautiously optimistic. They haven't shown anything with real value yet, so let's be patient and see what they can do. One day, all of these nasty loot goblin corporate hunchback companies will finally get dethroned. This genre has infinite amounts of untapped potential. I'm envisioning a game so grand that we won't have to think about whether or not the servers stay alive for long enough anymore. I'm envisioning a game garnering hundreds of millions of players. This may sound like a stretch, but the players are there, the game just isn't. An MMORPG can be anything you want it to be, but somehow, while making millions and millions of profit a year, these pathetic ass companies don't even try anymore. It makes me absolutely sick to see this genre being massacred over and over again, but one thing is for sure. At this rate, the genre is just going to fade away entirely, until someone, somewhere, picks up the burden and is hungry enough to push MMORPGs to the next level.
Who wants to be king?